Even if you're not a Twitter user, you need to know what's been going on at this social media giant. Since Elon Musk took over, there's been a clean out of the woke mob who were previously running the show, and I thought they were doing it as a disinformation and censorship centre for the left. Well, clearly they were. That's what the evidence thought anyway. That was the case for years, most of us said that, but it was always denied as a conspiracy theory by the leftist politicians and the tech giants as well. Well, I'm here to tell you it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was just a conspiracy. Musk, you see, has released reams of documents that I believe show the FBI and other government agencies were absolutely in cahoots to suppress information on behalf of the lefties. Sometimes it was to deny knowledge of the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, for example, and the corruption allegations surrounding him and his father. That's the President of the United States. Wow, where could that order have come from? Other times, it was to restrict accounts or suppress views that they simply didn't like. Medical experts who, for example, debunked the narrative surrounding COVID were banned or had their reach limited. Now, here's a qualified, eminent epidemiologist, and he's been on the Twitter trends blacklist. And what about top conservative podcasters and broadcasters, say like Dan Bongino? He too was on the Twitter naughty list. He was deemed not safe for work and made invisible to search requests. Incredibly, Twitter employees built blacklists and limited the visibility of certain topics with zero rationale other than, oh, I don't like it, so let's put them on the mute button. In the words of one user, the sanctimonious virtue signalling leftists who lecture everyone about protecting our democracy have been working to crush democracy by silencing and censoring voices that dissent from their groupthink. Shame on them all. Indeed, shame on them all. That's exactly what I thought. And what they've been doing is exactly as we thought. Friends, I cannot say how much of a disgrace this is, or for that matter, how important this expose is to the future of freedom. It conclusively shows how the deep state and the big tech giants are doing everything they can to deceive you, to promote false narratives, and to control what you see and what you hear and what you eventually think. It also explains why the lefties in power were so aghast at Musk buying the social media giant. It explains why Biden and his disgraceful cabal of crooked deep state operatives are, quote, keeping a close eye on Twitter. Well, they've been caught. Not only with their hand in the cookie jar and with their pants down, they've been busted lying to us all. Now, regular viewers will know that I've been warning you about this stuff since this show started. And I know that many perhaps doubted it or didn't believe me, and I can understand that. The scale of the conspiracy against you by government is almost unimaginable, except that it's actually true. And if you think American Democrats are the only ones involved, you will no doubt have some more mind-opening surprises coming your way pretty soon. The deep state is real and they hate you. And it's time more of us hated them right back. All right, on a similar but related discussion, we've often talked about this insatiable desire that government have for more control over your life. Whenever they manage to infringe on our liberty, they rarely, if ever, relinquish it. In fact, it's much more likely they use that gain, however minor it may be, as a springboard to take further control. We saw that through the COVID pandemic. Now, I'm going to be generous here, all right? Let's assume that most of the decisions taken by government were motivated by public health. But that didn't justify them ignoring proven science or claiming things were one way when they were clearly another. And just on the science, I should say, it's becoming increasingly obvious that the science here was actually based on decisions taken in America by the CDC and Dr. Fauci. If you've been following the news, you'll know that both have very serious questions to answer about that advice and that science. And I suspect our authorities have some questions to answer too. That said though, the fear campaign was so effective that most Australians actually went along with it. Not only did they put up with it, many became the equivalent of the Eastern Bloc informers of prohibited behaviour. Remember the Keiths and the Karens screeching about social distancing or your ineffective mask wasn't being worn properly. I mean, they're still etched in my memory. And you might know a few Keiths and Karens yourself. Anyway, most of the populists want to put all that nonsense and that bunkum behind them. And I suspect that the authorities and those who discriminated on the basis of vaccine status want you to forget it too. The reason I'm talking about it is because this period showed just how compliant most of us actually are. And by us, I actually don't mean me or likely you either. I'm just referring to the general Australian populace. And that compliance will only embolden our government. And based on the experience overseas, it will embolden other governments there too. And some of what they've got planned subsequent to our compliance over COVID are already evident. One of them is central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Now, in essence, these are programmable currencies that allow government to track everything you purchase. When I say programmable, I mean they also allow government to prohibit you from spending them on non-sanctioned items. That could mean, for example, limits on alcohol or fast food purchases. It could be used to limit the amount of meat you eat, or how much fuel you can buy, or the number of flights or holidays you're actually allowed to take. Now, all this sounds pretty far-fetched, but those moves are already well underway. Nigeria, scarcely a first mover in anything, launched a CBDC last year, and this week it capped cash withdrawals from ATMs at just $45 per day. Now, they're doing that in order to force people to go cashless. They want to know everything they're spending it on. See, the Nigerian people are quite wisely rejecting the use of CBDCs, and the government are determined to force it upon them. And what about here in Australia? Well, we've already got a CBDC pilot program, and the Reserve Bank has warned that, quote, it could displace the Australian dollar and result in people avoiding commercial banks entirely. But the bank has already dismissed privacy concerns, arguing that instead,
another reason for interest in CBDC is that it could yield privacy benefits, including better control of personal data, and so encourage more commercial exchange.
All right, the team working on the EAUD program, as it's known, is expecting to publish a report on the project around the middle of 2023. And you can bet it will be a resounding recommendation to introduce a CBDC, and it'll advise how to transition us all onto the ultimate government control mechanism. And it's not just here and Nigeria. Spain's central bank is also on the bandwagon. Now, I should remind you that the Spanish are often at the forefront of job, privacy and economy-destroying programs. So that'll give you an indication of their first mover advantage in this. Compare and contrast the attitude of these three governments with that of economic minnow El Salvador. Well, rather than create a CBDC of their own that's controlled by government, they chose to embrace the future of global money, Bitcoin. Well, that's how I regard it anyway. I consider Bitcoin as the greatest tool of financial freedom ever developed. It's decentralised, meaning it's not controlled by government, and it cannot be debased like regular government-issued currencies can. And I suspect that's why so many governments hate it. You see, Bitcoin is beyond their control, and control is what almost every government wants.